Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for the C3 stream. All right, gang, good evening. Hello, welcome. So glad to have you here. Welcome to Tuesday night teaching. It's time for the C3 stream. Glad to have you all here. Welcome. I got my cup of tea tonight. This is a mug going back to college. Got me through college on coffee. I'm drinking some evening tea. I've got my Bible notes ready. Yeah. How is everybody tonight? We do have a trivia question to start the evening. You guys seemed to like the trivia question last week, so we're starting off this week with another trivia question. Tonight's trivia question, put it in the comments what you think the correct answer is. Finish the famous title. Okay, this is a title that was given to a gentleman who has a rather large role in the early story related to Jesus. So this is we're finally hitting the time has come. Y'all been itching to get some Jesus. We are getting some Jesus, or at least one step closer to Jesus. We have content related to the New Testament. We have officially wrapped up the Old Testament. Last week we did the intertestamental period. Remember that word? Intertestamental. It's a big word. And there is a gentleman who has an impact on tonight. First name Herod. Last name Paranoid. Herod the Paranoid. Herod the Jew, or C, Herod the Great? No trick choice where it's D, all the above. Good question, Susan. Not this week. We don't have D. Though I will talk through A, B, and C with him. Good question. This is a Herod who is famous, not only in Christian circles and in the Bible related to the New Testament, but he is simply famous, period. Because this guy did a lot. Did a lot in the ancient world of ancient Israel. We're going to talk about him a little bit tonight. Herod. In Christian circles, he does not particularly have the greatest reputation, right? If you read the story of Jesus' birth, his narrative piece, he's kind of known as at first when I typed it out, I put Herod the mass murderer, because that's, but then I backed that off a little bit. Paranoid is probably a better word choice. Paranoid. So here you go. Put it in the comments right now. Herod the Paranoid, Herod the Jew, or Herod the Great? So far, we got votes for the Great. Another one for the Great. Thank you, Trudy. Thanks for the great message. See, I'll take it that you're voting, Trudy, for... She wrote, great message last Sunday. I will double that over in assuming that you are. Then later on, yeah, okay, C. All right, so far, everybody's voting for C, Herod the Great. No votes for Herod the Jew or Herod the Paranoid. All right. Well, I'm trying. Well, glad to have you here tonight. So fun to have you. If this is your first time tuning in, what we are doing on Tuesday nights, we do Tuesday night teaching. We do some Bible study. We sit around. We look at the Bible. We got a curriculum that we've been working our way through. And over the last 22 weeks... We've been hanging out for 22 weeks going through the Bible together, guys. That's pretty impressive. In the last 22 weeks, we started literally in the beginning. We started in Genesis, started by looking at the opening to the Bible, and have been taking what we refer to as a narrative or story, chronological kind of approach to the Bible. Just a reminder for you, if you open up the Bible and you open up to the table of contents, it is not, surprise, surprise, it is not arranged in chronological order. That's why people get so befuddled. They start looking at the Bible, they start trying to read it, and it's like, what? I don't get it. Well, it's because it's not arranged in chronological order. It is arranged by genre. It's arranged by genre. Just like the library has different genres, the Bible has different genres. That is literally what the word Bible in Greek translates to. It translates as library. It is a little library. So we've been taking a narrative look, and it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. 22 weeks in. We are now cresting into the New Testament. Today is the first time that we are going to take some like explicitly New Testament kind of orientation to our conversation. Set a little trajectory for you as everybody is still tuning in. Good. Glad to have you here. Love it, guys. Hey, drop in. We're still taking votes. Herod, finish the famous title. Herod the Paranoid, Herod the Jew, or Herod the Great? What do you vote for? Herod the Paranoid, Herod the Jew, Herod the Great. So a little bit of trajectory that I wanted to open up with tonight, guys, as we do look at the New Testament. The New Testament has a beginning point of 4 Gospels. A Gospel's life, death, resurrection of Jesus Christ in an account, right? So, but there are 4 of them. The way that I want to navigate this particular time together and what we're going to do specific for this stream is we are going to look at really just one of the Gospels. I know there's 4. I know you want to look at all of them. In fact, if you really are excited about it, you can go back to when we started all this stuff. When we started this whole stream and all that stuff, we looked at each of the 4 Gospels. But we are going to look at Luke. We're going to look at Luke. The reason we are going to look at Luke is because Luke shares the same author as the book of Acts. Okay? The Acts of the Apostle, Acts. We're going to look at the book of Luke, which then is originally written as the first part, kind of like part 1, and then part 2 is Acts, the book of Acts. And so part 1, part 2, they kind of go together, and because we're sticking with the narrative theme, we'll look at the book of Luke and then straight into the book of Acts, and then we're going to clean up and do some cleanup on the backside with some letters and stuff like that. So Joe, good. Yes. C, but I think it depends on who's speaking about him. Fair enough. Fair enough. True. Depends who's talking about the guy. Joe, I was wrong last week with bacon, so I'll guess Herod the Paranoid this week. Well, everybody, it was bacon. It was bacon, man. I mean, the pigs got him into deep trouble, Joe. You're okay. You're good. You can never go wrong with bacon, says Susan. Unfortunately, that's not a choice this week. Yeah, I could not figure out a way to get bacon as one of the answers. Herod the... Oh, I could have done Herod the Butcher. That would have been good. And that sounds like something people would like call him, right? Herod the Butcher. I feel like people would follow that. Herod the Butcher. Still taking votes, guys. Herod the Paranoid, Herod the Jew, or Herod the Great. All right, let's dive into a little bit of recap, and then we'll get into new content for tonight. Sound good? All right, this is what we were looking at last week. You don't need to see the notes. Look at all those notes. That's what we tried to cover. So what's funny is this is like 4 slides deep because it's like the intertestamental period. Very complex period. Very complex. But it's kind of fun. I had not brushed up on that stuff in a long time. So, what we covered last week was this period between the Old and the New Testaments. And it is a period that is rife with violence, upheaval. It's a period where we can see the Jewish people wrestling particularly with a sense of foreign conquest, right? I mean, this is the best graphic for it because it shows you that beginning in 850 BCE, right before Common Era, BC, you're talking like from 850 all the way to 165 BCE. They were a province, a vassal state. They were owned and operated by a foreign empire. From the Assyrians straight into the Babylonians, from the Babylonians into the Persians, Persians into the Greeks. Greeks, we looked at last week, it got super messy because the Greek Empire split into two. Started with Alexander the Great, and then it split into Ptolemies and the Seleucids, right? And they fought back and forth, and of course, Jerusalem is like front lines for what they're fighting over and where they're fighting, so that really helped them in their case. But then there's this little blip. There's this little blip where the Jews get a measure of independence, okay? They get this from 165 for just about 100 years till 63. There's this period with this, they throw a revolt is what they do. They end up revolting against the Greeks and establishing the Hasmonean dynasty. This is recorded in the book of, or the books of, anyone remember? What are the books? What are the books? What are the books that tell us about the intertestamental period? Anyone remember? These books would be common in the, what is referred to as the Roman Catholic Bible, but they would be apocryphal, that's the fancy word, in Protestant Bibles. Anyone remember last week? What are the books? It's the what revolt? The something revolt. They established the Hasmonean dynasty. Anyone remember from last week? It's Judah, or Judas blank, who leads this big revolt. Him and his brothers. They start it up north. It ends up coming all the way down to Jerusalem, and they take over Jerusalem. They end up taking over Jerusalem from the Greeks with the help, of course, later on. They do it themselves, but then later on there's some infighting. There we go. Now they're coming in. Yep. Good. 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 Yes. You were listening. John, way to go. Sarah's got it. Susan's got it. Trudy's got it. Yes. Maccabean. You're like, how do I spell that? The Maccabean Revolt, or First and Second Maccabees. That's the books. First and Second Maccabees, the Maccabean Revolt. Very good. Judas Maccabean. So the Maccabees start this whole thing. They establish an independent nation state, and it lasts for a few generations, 100 years, until some brothers can't get along. They just can't get along. And one of the brothers kicks the other brother out. The brother gets kicked out, goes to Rome and says, hey, look, I'll make a deal with you. If you give me lend me an army and take back the city of Jerusalem for me, put me in charge, and I will be a province for you. And Pompey, who is the Roman general, who is big expansionist general at the time, is like, yeah, free province, you bet, absolutely. So he lends an army, comes marching down into Jerusalem, and from then on, up until the time, up and through the time of Jesus, Rome is now in charge. So very good, the Maccabean Revolt. Sarah, he was known as the Great, but he was most certainly paranoid, and we remember reading he was a practicing Jew. Way to go, Tibbetts household. All right, you are like 99%. You're basically correct. You're basically correct. All right, so that's the answer for those of you who are curious about Herod. Okay, let's talk about this. Let me Tibbetts, hold on, Tibbetts family. But 10 points for Gryffindor. You're nailing it. There's a reason why I chose each of the three. You'll see why. All right. Here's a quick graphic for you that shows you, and this is kind of a neat, actually, it's a good graphic because it displays the territorial changes of the Jewish people during what we refer to as the monarchies and some of the shifting and the changing under the various empires. So if you go to the top left, it says Saul's territory. So if you can like reach way back, way back, Saul preceded David. Okay? And Saul was the very first official king of ancient Israel. He was the official king. And he came after the book of Judges. Okay, the book of Judges. And the era of the 12 tribes in the Confederation. And you can see how much he had kind of under his, what he had managed to put under his territory. And that's where the monarchy began. So even though the 12 tribes covered a lot greater territory, it took time for the tribes to come under his rule, and north and south and all this messiness. And there were all sorts of indigenous people all around that he was fighting. David had far more success and expanded the territory significantly way more, right? I mean, you can see directly to the right, David is his heir, and he expands it under King David. David is kind of the golden era. And to this very day, the Zionist movement in modern-day Israel is trying to reestablish and trying to define Israel according to what the biblical account has as David's territory. Okay? That's what a lot of the debate is over. What lines and what territories belong to who. David had the biggest kind of moment. Now, Solomon, in the beginning, Solomon actually expanded it even greater than David, but it was very short-lived. Eventually, it retracted. So Solomon made it go even bigger, but then towards the end, as things started to go poorly for him, it retracted and got smaller and smaller and smaller. By the time you get to Rehoboam, you get the north-south split. Rehoboam is Solomon's son. And then eventually, you can track down the years there. You have just the southern kingdom of Judah. Eventually, that's what gets kind of reestablished. And then you see in the bottom right hand, this is the time of the Maccabees and the Hasmonean dynasty. That they, particularly under the latter part of the Hasmoneans, there's one or two of the guys who get it really going, and they start annexing territory. We talked a little bit about that last week. But they like annex the south, and they annex Samaria, for example. They're just like, you belong to us now. Okay. So the Hasmoneans managed to establish it to around that size and shape. Okay. The reason, again, this is all important is because of what we're going to look at going into tonight. And this is the backdrop. What we're going to try to do tonight is finish setting up Jesus's entrance. That's what we're going to try to do. Finish setting up. We looked at all the history that preceded him. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit deeper and more clearly about the theology and the faith that the Jewish people had begun to cling to during the Hasmonean dynasty, during the Maccabean revolt. Because it really does shape, when Jesus arrives on the scene, it shapes a lot of the expectations of Messiah. So, all right, let's talk about Herod the Great first, though. Let's talk about Herod the Great. So, Herod gets put in control of the province under Rome. Herod is Herod the Great. That is the answer. However, he more or less could have probably been considered the others as well. Herod the Paranoid and Herod the Jew. Now, saying and calling him a Jew is a little bit misleading in transparency. Why? Let me see if I can show you one of the maps. Yeah, that's better. This is a good map. All right. So here you have look at specifically, I want you to focus on the yellow. You see the yellow there? That's the yellow. That's the yellow. That's Judea is the southern part, or Judah. And Judea is the Romanized or Latin term for Judah. Slap an "ia" on Judah and you get Judea. Okay? So the Roman province of Judea, which also included then therefore Samaria, because under the Hasmoneans they annexed it. That's the area that Herod the Great ruled. Herod the Great is technically from Idumea, which is further to the south. Do you see that? Idumea? Idumea, he's a southerner who is technically outside. This is where it gets kind of weird and funky, but he is from Idumea. And he is, if you take, where does Idumea come from? It comes all the way from Edom, which comes from Esau, as in the brother of Jacob. So, technically, tracking the bloodlines, Herod is not exactly Jewish. He's the awkward cousin. Idumea and the people, the Edomites, would be considered outside the Jewish faith and ethnicity. However, because Idumea came under Roman control earlier, and Herod gets educated in Rome itself. He gets groomed to be a puppet for Rome. So Rome sends Herod the Great from Idumea to be in charge of ancient Israel at the time of Jesus's birth. And the Jewish people don't like him. It's kind of this joke that he's a wannabe Jew. He's like supposed to be the Jewish king, but isn't exactly Jewish. So he does all the things that he's supposed to do in order to be Jewish, act Jewish, smell Jewish, eat Jewish. Why? Well, because he rules the Jewish people. So he's got to keep them happy. And part of what makes them happy is doing the Jewish thing. So he's kind of like a Jew wannabe in that regard. He tries to posture himself as a Jew, despite the fact that he is like kind of not Jewish technically. So he's that gray fuzzy area. The way that he tries to build gratitude, what's the term? Ingratiate? Is that the term? I think that's the term. Did I just make that word up? Maybe I did. The way that he tries to bribe, for lack of a better term, the way that he tries to end up bribing the men and women that he is ruling over as Herod the Great is to build. This guy builds like mad, okay? He builds fortresses. He builds a harbor for trade. And most notably, he builds the second temple. That's what it's called, the second temple. He goes to Jerusalem, the heart of where he's supposed to be ruling, right? And of course, what is the most important thing to all the Jewish people now that they're, back in Jerusalem and everything, out of exile and all that jazz? It's the temple. So Herod, in order to make the populace happy and prove that he is a good Jew like them, even though he's not, he launches on one of the biggest, most substantial overhauls, expansion projects of the temple. Up until now, they've been using, if you remember back to Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel came during the time of Ezra. Okay? And Herod the Great rebuilds the temple completely. He rebuilds it on the Temple Mount, which you can see there. It's massive. It's absolutely insane how giant this structure is. I don't have my comparisons for you on this stream, but in the past, when a year ago, when this all kind of happened with this whole COVID stuff, we did temple. We studied the temple together. That's when the stream first started, and we, man, we've come a little ways, haven't we, guys? Half the time, nothing even worked in the beginning. Took a little while. But we got there. So Herod builds this massive temple. And this is the temple that Jesus would have been going to when he was a boy, and this is the temple that he was tried at, and all these sort of things. And this is where the Sanhedrin, that's the fancy term for all the ruling council and the Jewish elite, would have come. There were different levels or areas, that's a better way to say it, different areas that certain people were allowed in, of increasing strictness and holiness. Okay, so for example, the non-Jews were only allowed in certain parts. Women could go deeper than the non-Jews, but then the men could go further, but then they stopped, and only the priests could go in further than that. And then only the high priest, or the priest on duty, could go in further than that. So there's kind of like this movement towards, or the pinnacle of the Holy of Holies, which is where the presence of God supposedly rested. So this temple cannot be underscored enough in terms of its significance and its role. Part of the reason why Herod the Great is called the Great is because of how great of a builder he was. And particularly, most famously, he built this temple, the second major Jewish temple. They call it the Second Temple, even though it wasn't really the Second Temple. They call it the Second Temple. And this is where Jesus would have hung out. When we talk about, like last year we did the temple steps stuff, he would have taught at the steps to this that led up to this temple. You can go to this very day and see the Temple Mount. You can go to you ever heard of the Weeping Wall, or the Western Wall? It's the last remaining wall of the historic temple, of this temple. This temple was razed to the ground in 70 A.D. In fact, Jesus predicted that it would be destroyed more than one occasion. He predicts it. Who is it? Titus? I think it's the famous Roman Emperor Titus who comes in and destroys it. It's this famous, and he sacks it. He strips it all out because it's on his arch, Titus's arch in Rome. I'm 99% sure on that one. But this is the temple that Herod builds to substantiate himself and to make the populace happy. Now, he is also, it is great and wondrous as this architectural feat is, as amazing as it was for him to also build a harbor. I mean, no small thing to build. Caesarea Philippi is the harbor. You can go there also to this very day and see how he created that. He also built the fortresses, like I mentioned, and the reason that he built these fortresses is because he was horribly paranoid. I mean, he's a ruler, and his populace hates him because he's not really Jewish, and he's afraid they're going to take him over. They're going to overthrow him. This is why, in the biblical story, he commits mass murder by ordering all children under the age of 2 years old to be killed when Jesus is born. Well, it's because he's paranoid that there's going to be a coup, there's going to be a ruler, he's going to be overthrown. A second king in the area means that his viable rule is coming to an end. So he kills all the kids. He kills his own kids, by the way. He murders his family, murders his wife. He's paranoid and ends up building one of the most famous structures in ancient Israel that you can go to today is a castle on the top of a plateau. It's called Masada. You guys ever heard of Masada before? It's literally on top of a plateau. And he built it as a self-sustaining, impenetrable fortress. And it is it's a famous place. And it is the place that all Israeli soldiers. So I don't know if you guys know this, but in contemporary modern world, there's a enforced draft where everybody who's Israeli citizens have to serve in the army for a certain number of years before they can enter into public life. So they serve in the military, and the final moment of the military training for all soldiers is to go to Masada, whereupon they see there's this famous story, and I think it's called Masada. Peter O'Toole. Do you guys know the movie I'm talking about? Let's see if I can find it. Masada, Peter O'Toole. I think it's just called Masada. Peter O'Toole. Do you guys remember Peter O'Toole? He was a legit actor, man. Yeah, it's a mini-series. There you go. You can go watch it. 1981 mini-series drama. Peter O'Toole. 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hey, pretty solid. And you can pick it up on Amazon, guys. It's a famous story about the Jewish people, and particularly a group called the Zealots, who hole up in Herod the Great's personal fortress, Masada, and they hold out longer than anybody else fighting the Romans. But now I'm telling you about the Zealots, and I'm getting ahead of myself once more. All right. Basically, you need to know that Herod the Great is in control when Jesus is born. He's a puppet of Rome. He is a leader that is paranoid. He is a leader that oversees the Jews, acts like Jews, and is trying to foster a Jewish way of life. And yet he himself isn't a Jew. And he is considered to be one of the greatest rulers of the era because of his prolific stunning architectural features that he accomplished. Particularly, he built the temple. It's kind of a big deal. All right. Any questions on Herod? You guys know what I'm talking about when I talk about Masada? Does anyone know about that one? Drop in the comments. If you know about Masada, give me a thumbs up or something. Otherwise, or if you're curious about it, let me know. I can answer more questions about it. But it really is quite fascinating. Okay. Let's do this. So Herod's in control, but there are 4 dominant Jewish ways of thought, theology. I'm hesitant to say like churches, but kind of like, you know, just like right now, there are going to be different churches with different theologies and different ways of interpreting Christianity and embodying Christianity. The same is true in ancient Judaism. Rome just allows them to murder the kids. Didn't they have laws against murder? Nope. Yep. He just did it. Local ruler, man. You know, it doesn't really give us the finer details, Joe. Good question. Does Rome just allow the murder of all those kids? Didn't they have laws against murder? Good question. Local ruler, despot, warlord. Basically what Herod was. And while in charge of the area, you know, all it took was for him to say, hey, there's a potential coup. We got to put the coup down. So he can just justify it according to civil unrest, which the area had such a strong reputation for civil unrest because of the Hasmonean dynasty and revolts and all this. It actually comes up very important about what we're about to talk about with the Zealots. That is to say that there was an active group of, let's just talk about them. One of the 4 dominant subcultures of Judaism when Jesus comes on the scene are the Zealots. And these are the guys who were behind the Hasmonean dynasty. They're holding to the Hasmonean revolt legacy. And basically, they are violent. They are anti-foreigners. They hate occupation. They hate non-Jews. They are all warriors. And what they want is nothing more than to throw off the Roman dictators and reestablish once more a independent nation state. And so they are causing all sorts of trouble all over ancient Israel when Jesus is born. And so, Joe, to your question, you know, it's no big deal for Herod to say that he's putting down a group of insurrectionists. He just doesn't give the finer details that he's killing a bunch of 2-year-olds. He just says there's going to be a group of people who are behind some revolt, and Rome signs off, no problem. No issues. And it's because the Zealots were so active. Zealots would do hit and run guerrilla tactics. They would, target Roman occupied fortresses, cities, encampments, food stockpiles, and they would hit all those things, cause as much destruction, kill as many people as possible, and then run. So they were experts in guerrilla warfare who learned from Judah Maccabean. And they were one of the dominant, hugely influential groups when Jesus is born. This also would have been the group that is looking for a particular type of Messiah, a Messiah that looks like Judah Maccabean, a Messiah on a horse with a sword who's going to throw off Rome. So the Zealots are very, very influential, and they would look at and anticipate, a Messiah, specifically God's intervention in the world, as reestablishing an independent nation state. So that's the bottom right with the sword and the little helmet and like the little nation thing going on there. So that's one of the popular groups of subcultures when Jesus explodes on the scene. He doesn't explode on the scene. He like whispers into the scene. That's part of the irony of all this. He comes in a whisper instead of a big bang. Let's go bottom left. We'll go reverse order. So you've got the Zealots. The Zealots, by the way, they don't really care about as much. Their stress is not on religion, but on Jewish ethnicity. They're less concerned about being Jewish and following Jewish religious practices. They are more concerned about being Jewish ethnically and establishing Judaism as in terms of governance. If you move to the left there, bottom left, you see an old bearded dude. There is what the artist's rendering of like a symbol for wisdom, like this cup with a little flame in there, like a lamp. It looks like a lamp. The idea there being kind of like wisdom, and then you see a scroll with a bunch of arrows to it. This is another dominant group, a subculture called the scribes. They are experts in the law, okay? And basically, this group of Jews believed that everything that needs to be found in order to be Jewish can be found in specifically the Jewish laws, okay? So not even the context of the Jewish laws, but just in following and living according to the law codes. And so they memorized and studied and sought the wisdom that comes with knowing the laws. They're all about the law, following how things are supposed to be followed. The next group, top right, are the Sadducees. Top right. The Sadducees expanded beyond just simply the laws to include the context that the laws are presented in. Okay? So the Jewish laws are housed, for example, in the story of Moses. Moses gives the laws. The Sadducees agree with and also appreciate not only the laws, but the context of the laws up to and including all 5 books of the Torah. All 5, the first 5 books of your Bible. The Sadducees were on board and supportive and studied and quoted and thought about the first 5 books of the Bible, sometimes referred to as the Pentateuch. Penta, 5, the Torah. Okay? So they also, because they're a little unique subgroup, they did not believe in life after death. That's why you have that little door there with the X on it. They did not believe in the resurrection. This group of Jews focused their time and energy on running the temple. That's why you have the image of the temple there as well. They were temple focused. Their stronghold was in Jerusalem. This group of Jews focused all of their energy in Jerusalem and were really the religious elite that ran Jerusalem and the temple practices. Okay, they ran all the sacrifices and the priesthood and all that sort of stuff. They were also the ones who were most buddy-buddy with ancient Rome. The Sadducees were most buddy-buddy with ancient Rome. So you had, for example, Roman guards that guarded the city, but then you also had temple guards who guarded the temple. And so there were some give and take around, who got to judge what locally over and against what went to Rome. And the Sadducees were the advocates and mediators and buddy-buddy with Rome. They're the ones who navigated the Roman relationship. Then if you move top left, you have the final group, the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees accepted not only the laws, 613 laws, not only the books that housed the laws, the first 5 books of the Bible, but they in fact embraced the entire, what we refer to as the Old Testament, or the entire of the Hebrew Scriptures. Sometimes, Trudy, what is referred to as the Tanakh. Okay, you have a Tanakh Bible. Tanakh. T-A-N-A-K. And what Tanakh represents in Hebrew, in the language, you drop out the vowels. So it would be T for Torah, N for Nevi'im, and K for Ketuvim. And basically, T for Torah means the first 5 books, the law. N, Nevi'im is one of them is I think it's the prophets. The prophets are the prophetical books, okay? So all the prophets that we look at, the minor and major prophets, the Pharisees are on board with the prophets. And then the Ketuvim is the wisdom literature, okay? It's like the special writings, wisdom literature. So like Esther, Song of Solomon, Psalms, all that type of stuff. That's not prophetical. That's not prophet books. That is wisdom literature. The Pharisees embraced the entire Old Testament or Hebrew Scriptures, Tanakh. The others did not. Some people are surprised by that. Not all Jews accepted the whole ancient texts, all the ancient texts. Pharisees did believe in life after death. That's why you get the check mark over the door there. They believed in the resurrection. In fact, the Apostle Paul later on in the book of Acts, we will see this. He gets the Sadducees and the Pharisees to fight over resurrection. He's very, very clever. He would have been a part of the Pharisees. He was a Pharisee himself. The Pharisees also believed that eventually, as part of the Messianic age, when the Messiah came, he would bring the Jewish people all back together at Jerusalem and at Judah, right? So the Israel, ancient Israel. When the Messiah came, he would bring that emphasis on the holy city and the countryside and just kind of reestablishing the nation state. So, yep, that's correct, Joe. Joe asks a good question. They didn't believe in life after death. He's talking about the Sadducees, so they followed the laws because, ? Yeah, the idea there is you're still trying to appease God. You're still trying to make life good in the moment, and the way that you make life good in the moment is by following the 613 laws. Bear in mind, too, never underestimate the power of culture and cultural values and the way in which you're raised. The Sadducees were raised in such a strong Jewish environment. Everybody followed the laws. Like, everybody did. That wasn't as much the debate. Everybody, all of the subgroups, with the exception of the Zealots, and even the Zealots to a degree followed the laws or acknowledged the law. They just were more concerned with killing the bad guys than they were with the law. But everybody believed in the power of the law, the importance of the law. The Zealots simply put it on hold until they could kick all the bad guys out. Everybody believed in one God. Everybody was on board with one living God. Everybody was on board with a sense of nationalistic Jewish identity. Like, they all had this real strong sense. All of them had this strong sense of the Jewish, what it meant to be Jewish. And even if you belong to a different faction within Judaism, you were still Jewish, and Jews stuck together. All right? Like, you're Jewish, you're family. You can disagree, you can argue, whatever. But if you are part of God's chosen people, you are part of God's chosen people. And it's really the Jews versus the world. Okay? And then you can see there also Torah. Everybody appreciated and followed the law. It's just a matter of, for the Zealots, they felt like they needed to get the bad guys out before they could really emphasize the law. So good question, Joe. But yes, you're right. All right. These four factions that really dictated the way in which Jewish people lived and saw their faith, created then specific expectations around a Messiah. So when Jesus shows up, there's a reason why nobody looks at Jesus and says, yeah, that must be the Messiah. Sure, no problem, that's it. They don't do that, like, overtly. In fact, one of the guys who becomes a disciple of his, is like, Nazareth, nothing good can come from Nazareth. There's no way that guy can be the Messiah, right? And by the way, subnote, Jesus attracts followers from all the subcultures. There are zealots who become part of his discipleship. There are all of them. He attracts across the spectrum, which is an interesting and important theological statement. It's not like Jesus came and said, yep, you guys are right. He didn't do that. He didn't fit the messianic expectations overtly of any one demographic. He kind of did his own thing. He was in small ways fulfilled messianic expectations to varying degrees. So here you can see, this is a snapshot of trying to say, like, all right, let me just talk you through it. So in the center there, you've got the circle with the palm trees and the animals. This is trying to capture for you in like a city skyline. This is trying to capture for you the idea that the palm trees represent the Garden of Eden, and how the idea is that when a Messiah comes, he will reestablish the Garden of Eden. That'll be a restoration of the garden. And that will take place at Jerusalem, which is why you have the Jerusalem skyline. That even though it is a garden, the garden has now moved to be incorporate a city. And so when the Messiah comes, it'll be a garden again, and it'll happen in and around Jerusalem. And the imagery there is the lion will lay down with the lamb, the ox and the serpent will be friends, everybody's chummy. And this is all prophetic language and prophetic references. So the Messiah is going to introduce a messianic age, a golden age. Okay, the Messiah comes and a golden age happens. We have a different view. I'm not talking about like heaven. I'm talking about a messianic age. In the same way that you have like the golden age of David, or the golden age of, I don't know, Queen Elizabeth, whatever. Like a highlight moment for a nation. The idea here is that the Messiah will bring that for the people of the Jewish people, the people of Israel. Top left, you have the idea that it will be a king, that this Messiah will be a king figure, and you see again that symbol for wisdom. The idea here is that there are a lot of people who believed when the Messiah comes, he will come and be part of David's line. He'll be descended from King David, and he'll be a lot like King Solomon. He'll be super wise. He's going to be a wise and learned, scholarly leader. He will rule with justice and wisdom and insight, and that's picking up on basically like a new and improved Solomon. And with his wisdom will come fertility, will come that golden age, will come all the goodness that everybody's like on board with the idea of the golden age. It's just a matter of how that golden age will happen. And so, like, for example, the people who are scribes love this idea. Love the idea of a wise and learned, scholarly Messiah who can quote forwards and backwards all the laws and who will rule with justice as a true, right, godly king. And so they draw heavily on the idea that they're waiting and watching for a king figure. Well, this little hick from up north Jesus, who's covered in dust and grime and dirt, who's the son of a carpenter, doesn't quite fit the whole king vibe, at least not overtly. So the scribes look at him and are like, huh? Nah, like, you don't fit the profile, buddy. Then, for example, you got this other group, or other messianic expectation of the top right. This has to do with stressing God's presence and God's divinity. That when a Messiah comes, he will come almost as like a priest, and he will allow God's presence to break through. That part of the Messianic age will be God's presence once again dwelling with God's people. The idea here is, if you remember going back to, for example, Moses introduced the tabernacle. Eventually you get the temple, and God's presence actually rested in the tabernacle and in the temple, in as a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. There was like a physical, visual expression of God's presence coming and ruling and being with his people. And so the emphasis here is that a Messiah will usher in, it's kind of like this priest guy, this high priest. He will usher in the presence of God once more. And things will be hunky-dory. Once again, you get that fertility thing. That's what the little green plants are. It's all about fertility. It'll be a golden age, and God will dwell with his people just like he used to. Okay? Just like he used to walk with Moses, and just like he used to walk with the people before, the Messiah will do so once again. So that's another messianic expectation. So when you have Jesus again coming up as like this, traveling rabbi, this each one of these gets fulfilled to some degree. He is from the line of David. He's incredibly wise. He's the incarnation. He is God's presence. He is God's presence here among us. Oh, and by the way, God's presence does break through in tangible, real ways that people can witness. A quick example would be at the baptism of Jesus. You have the clouds parting and breaking through, and you have the dove descending on him bodily. You have the Spirit descending upon him as a dove, and that happens in each of the Gospels. So you have this prophetic fulfillment of God's presence breaking through, and Jesus does do that. Like, it does. So, all right, bottom left, you got the sword there, and in the background, you have like a shadowed figure of a king crown again. The Zealots like this one. Warrior king, conqueror. Warrior king, a conqueror who will bring the nations under himself, where even the Gentile world will have to acknowledge him as king, where even the Gentiles and their empires are going to be brought low and acknowledge he is in charge. And once again, we have that happening in Jesus. We have the promise that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. It's just that he didn't come riding down the street on a stallion with armor and a sword and a spear to stab Roman people. It's not how he did it. Instead, he came on a donkey. He came humbly on a donkey riding through, and he allowed the Romans to spear him, spear his side, and water gushed out. So talk about a role reversal there, and undermining, usurping expectations. And yet, interestingly enough, Zealots followed him. In fact, Simon the Zealot followed him. There are examples in the Bible where people think that there were zealots in the crowd because they start chanting to make Jesus king. They want to make Jesus king. And he's like, no. I'm not here for earthly king like the way you define earthly king. I'm not here simply to throw Rome out and rule from a throne here in this world, not the way you're thinking about it. I'm not just going to replace Caesar. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for something so much bigger, so much bigger. And then bottom right, you've got this overwhelming question that really, all the Jews struggled with, all the Jews wrestled with. And the question is, who is going to participate and who is going to be a part of this messianic age? Who's going to be there? Who's going to be a part of it? You have in there the question mark because not everybody agreed. Not everybody thought the same thing. Okay? You've got a guy who's standing inside the Ten Commandments, and then you have a guy who's outside the Ten Commandments. The idea here is a couple things. One, that there are Jewish people, and then there are non-Jewish people. And so many people, I won't even say some, many people believed that the Messiah was going to come specifically for the Jews. And the Gentiles did not get to be part of the whole rescue messianic age thing. Many of the Jews believed that this is a messianic Jewish Messiah. This is a Jewish Messiah for the Jewish people, and the Gentiles be danged, Well, be damned, quite literally. Like, get sent to hell type thing. That was a common thought. Others thought, no. This Messiah is actually only going to come for faithful Jews. Jews who actually follow the commandments. Jews who only and very carefully adhere to the 613 laws. Jews who follow the Torah. And if you don't follow the Torah, even though you're Jewish, you will not be included in the Messianic age. When the Messiah comes, you're going to be on the outskis. Tough nuts. And still other Jews believed that the only way the Messiah would come, in fact, is only if everybody did follow the laws. A lot of Jews actually believed that the Messiah cannot, and this is actually still to this very day, modern Jews, to this day, continue to believe this, that the only way that the Messiah will come is if every Jew actually follows the commands the way they're meant to be followed. And so there's a couple different options there. One is to kill everyone who doesn't follow it, or two, convert and condemn everyone who doesn't follow it and get them to follow it, pressure them into following it. I mean, these are, I know it sounds silly, guys, but like these are actual issues that Jewish people wrestle with to this very day. So when you think about Jesus showing up and being born in Bethlehem, getting chased out of Bethlehem, spends a little time in Egypt, and then comes back up to Nazareth, this tiny little town. Nazareth is this little backwater town. I mean, this is like, think of some little rinky rural town up north. Like, seriously, that's what we're talking about. No more than a handful of families. I mean, a lot of scholars think maybe 40, 50, 60 people in the town of Nazareth when Jesus is being raised. A handful of families, okay? And Jesus starts preaching and teaching all around the area. And as he's preaching and teaching to the Jewish people, this is what they're expecting out of a Messiah. This is what they're looking for. This is what they're watching out for. This is what is shaping their expectations. And so when Jesus shows up, it makes sense that not everybody jumped on the bandwagon. It makes sense that the Pharisees grilled him. It makes sense that the Sadducees hated him. It makes sense that the scribes tried to catch him all the time. When Jesus allows his disciples to eat the heads off the grains of wheat, which the scribes interpreted as work because it's harvesting, and Jesus says the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath, that is undermining a whole lot of theological legacy and questions that people have invested in and explored, and that don't fit the paradigm. It doesn't fit it. Jesus does not fit the Messiah profile. So, This is the world that Jesus enters. This guy gives you guys a sense of what Jesus is stepping into when he comes into the world. He's coming into a Jewish world that is plural in nature. It has a lot of still Greek influence, Roman influence, and even the Jews themselves have wide disparity between them. And he shows up in this tiny little town and starts his ministry. Let's finish with this map, and then we'll be done for tonight. So you can see in the yellow, that's where Herod eventually would die. This is what Pontius Pilate would take over ruling. You have Herod's sons, who would rule some of these other areas. Herod Antipas, and then Philip way up north. Those are sons, Herod's sons. And then you have the Decapolis, which is just largely considered Gentile. Jews are living there, but it's mostly Gentile. You still have Idumea to the south, and Phoenicia to the north. All right. That's it. That's what we're setting up for. Do you guys feel set up well? Do you guys get it? I know, I hope this isn't dry for you, but the reason I feel like it's important to talk about is because when we read the Gospel of Luke next week, I'll be able to refer back to some of this stuff. And it's going to make so much more sense when we look at the Gospel of Luke, because you're going to say, oh, the Pharisees, that's right. They believed in resurrection, and they believed heavily in the Bible. Got it. Oh, yeah, the scribes. That's why they're trying to trick him, and et cetera, et cetera. Herod the Great. Oh, yeah, that's why in the Lucan narrative, why this happens or that happens, so. All right, that's what we got for tonight. Another little bit of a history lesson. We didn't dive into Scripture as much because we're setting you up for diving into New Testament fully next week. Any remaining questions, comments, or thoughts, take a moment and drop it in the comments, and I'll try to answer or respond to them. I'd love to be able to, as always, do that with you and for you guys. Hey, thanks for being part of the community tonight. As always, guys, I so enjoy spending time with you, growing with you, learning with you, and studying together. You're part of the online community, and that's a fabulous, amazing, incredible thing to be part of this Christian community that uses the tool of online. It's an awesome thing. So speaking of online, we're online and on site Sunday mornings, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10:30. We are tracking along on the I Am Lenten series. Hope you're doing your Easter groups if you're in an Easter group, and having fun and growing and learning about the I Am statements in John. And then, as always, want to make the invitation, join me not only on Tuesday nights, but you can join me Thursday mornings, 7:30 a.m. for my morning meditations experience. It is different. It is not like Tuesday night teachings. It is much more focused on meditation, scripture, prayer, and then some Holy Spirit shout outs. So thank you so much. Thanks for joining in tonight, guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Trudy. Thank you. Joe, thanks for the questions. Sarah Tibbetts, tell Will that you guys get the gold prize for knowing that it is Herod the Great, but he was definitely paranoid, and he was also trying to be a practicing Jew. So shout out to you. Guys, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thanks for being here tonight. It's always a blast to hang out with you. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Can't wait to see you guys. Go live some lives. Go elevate Christ. Go be a church for those who aren't here yet. And I will see you all on Thursday morning. If not Thursday morning, then for sure on Sunday. God bless, guys. Thanks for hanging out tonight. Hope this was enriching and a blessing for you. So have a great night. Blessings.